want to welcome any public audience that we have so far, and our artist Lada Suomenrinne, who's with us. We have a couple of other artists who are perhaps trying to log in. It is 5:31 here in the afternoon, evening in Finland, and very early in the morning for some of our artists on the other side. And Cannupa may be a little bit late because he's actually arriving on an airplane, and he's going to find a quiet area in the airport to join us from. So we're waiting for Larry and Linda, and Lada is already here. And my name is Carmen Vendelin-Laukkanen, and I'm the museum director at Nelimarkka-museo. And these exhibitions were my idea. When I moved from the United States to Finland, I was thinking about what I could do, what I could offer that would be unique here. I was actually like a European art specialist, and I didn't think that would be that special for an American living in Europe. But I thought that it would be interesting to bring Indigenous artists, and I thought that it would be interesting to try to facilitate more collaboration between Indigenous artists from the United States and Sami artists in this region. So when I was thinking about having a Native American exhibition, I was thinking that that Europeans might not be so familiar with contemporary Native people, that they might be thinking about cowboys and Indians and kind of this 19th century historic idea of what a Native American might be. I'd seen this documentary about this culture in Germany of reading these pulp fiction novels about cowboys and Indians, and then people go to these conferences and dress up, and this German man was saying that he feels like in his soul he's a Native American. So I thought that it would be good to bring real contemporary Native American art and Native American artists so that they could talk about their art and themselves, and to kind of maybe show something that's more real than kind of a romanticized or historicized view of Native people, and getting past any stereotypes and this idea of like the vanishing race, the idea that Indigenous people are not around anymore, that they don't, that they are historical, that they're not still among our population, and continuing to honor traditions and ancestors while also being part of the contemporary world. And so hopefully that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think it's really important to be presenting contemporary Indigenous art in the framework of the wider contemporary art more generally. And so I know it's maybe a little, I don't know if problematic is too strong a word, but complicated by the idea that, if you're trying to feature these artists and then you're saying that the exhibition is identity related, like maybe that's kind of, in a way, othering, but we can talk about that more, perhaps, this evening, morning, depending on your location. And when I first started at Nelimarkka-museo and I was asked what kind of exhibitions I would want to do, I had told a newspaper reporter that I was interested in having Sami artists, having Native American artists, and I was very pleased that local people in Alajärvi were coming up to me and saying that they were interested in seeing Sami artists. And so, I thought that was really wonderful. And when I had first reached out to Jenni Laiti, and she had suggested this exhibition with her art and Lada's art, I told them about my idea for this other exhibition, and they thought it'd be great if we could have both at the same time. And I thought so as well. And hopefully Cannupa will be here soon, because Jenni and Laiti were thinking a lot about having like kind of, how you envision a utopian future for, from the Sami context. And Cannupa has this idea of future ancestral technologies. And I thought that was interesting, coming at it from a different way, but maybe both kind of hopeful ideas about the future. And I believe, and Lada can say for sure, that Jenni and Lada were able to meet Cannupa when they went to Santa Fe last year. Is that no? Okay.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
I hear you. Yes.
Yes.
Yay! You've
hello.
made it.
I just
Yes.
now got in using Debbie's link.
Great. So I'm doing that. So hopefully the audience sees me now.
I can see you.
Thank you for your continued patience, everyone. We now have Larry with us as well, and I've sent a link to our other presenters' family members to see if that gets them in. So hopefully, I do not know why this didn't work. So we had specific individual links for each person that they had to use. And then when that didn't work, I tried to delete everybody and add them again. But the new link was actually still the same link that they had before, the same old link. So it still didn't work. So adding new family members seems to be the charm here. So if you've been with us the whole time waiting, we really, really appreciate it. And,
that are designed especially for young artists. That's the way it should be. Because I remember back when I was a young artist starting out, it was so difficult because there were hardly any opportunities for us, especially Indigenous artists. So we had to make our own. We had to, the Canadians have that saying with the politics, elbows up. And that refers to the hockey players who go into a defensive posture, and that's what young Indigenous artists have always had to do. They've always had to go into this defensive posture just so they can make art, and they had to be aggressive, and the bottom line for all artists, of any generation though, is to continue making their art, continue telling their stories, and especially as new stories evolve, new life experiences that are happening, right this moment. And we think about the new life experiences that are happening, the one thing that connects us all is the climate crisis. I'm watching the news. I was watching the news this morning about back home in Alaska, and the villages all along the western coast of Alaska are flooded. They're underwater. So you see these photographs this morning, these villages, and they're flooded, all up and down the coast, and it's a crisis, because here in the, there in the north, the global climate impacts are happening faster than the rest of the world, so they're getting flooded. And a lot of those villages, I don't know what's going to happen to them. They're underwater right this moment, and they're in emergency crisis mode, and helicopters are flying in this morning, and saving people from the rooftops, and that's happening now. We don't have to make anything up. This is the life we're in. This is what we're dealing with. And I think as artists, we have an obligation, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. I think we have an obligation to tell the stories of our time. It happens anyway. That you look through the whole history of art, you look at art, from 5,000 years ago. They're telling the stories of what happened in their culture in that era. We look at the art from 200 years ago, from art all around the world. Every single place in the world, humans are creative, and because we're creative, we make art about our life experiences, and we're able to see what was happening to those peoples. And I think that what's going to happen in this era you know, is that we're in such a unique time, you know, that I think that's going to be some of the most significant art of our times is so that people, you know, 100 years in the future, 100 years from now, they could go back and look at the art from 2025 and see what was happening around the world, you know, in all different countries, you know, because it affects us all, you know. So, and because of that, I find myself making art about my everyday experiences. You know, I walk out my front door and I ask, what do I see, you know, today? You know, or go out my back door and, you know, and I'm fortunate that I live in the western part of America where it's rural. You know, it's part of it is city, but part of it is rural too. So I can go out my back door and I can see wild coyotes and deer, rabbits, you know, so nature. See nature out my back door. All I have to do is walk out my back door and I see coyotes walking by, you know, and ravens. Look up, you know, and there's ravens all over the place. And, you know, this spring I watched a mother and father raven building their nest and I watched them, you know, nurture their little babies and then the little baby ravens, you know, they fledged and they flew away. And so all summer I've been seeing that group of 7 ravens, you know, learning how to be ravens and they're getting into trouble and they're learning how to live in this world, you know, and I was thinking before, you know, humans arrived here, they're living here long before we were. So this is a desert area. You know, it gets hot here in the summer. And those ravens, those 7 ravens, would fly through the entire neighborhood, the entire area. You know what they learned? You know what they taught themselves? Was that there's a school nearby and they have a big soccer field. And they found one of the water fountains, not, you know, what they used to water the grass. What do they call that? You know,
Sprinklers.
the sprinklers.
Yeah.
So they found one sprinkler on the very corner of the soccer field where nobody could see it, and they broke it.
Huh?
And so that's where they went for water every day. So and it was hidden from the groundskeeper. The groundskeeper couldn't see it. So these smart ravens, you know, they made themselves a water source, you know, from a soccer field. And then they still hunt. You know, there's still rabbits and, you know, and field mice and stuff like that. So it's very interesting, you know, seeing how these smart baby ravens are adopting to our new reality, you know, of heat, you know, and they're surviving. And I think that's what's going to happen, you know, with us too. We adopt and we just try to figure things out, you know. I think I talked long. So I'll go ahead and pass it on to somebody else. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. And I was wanting to ask you about the place of humor in your work, but let's have Cannupa talk about his work first, and then maybe we can circle back to that.
Hello, my friends. This is Cannupa, Hanska, Luger. Thank you for maintaining the line while we figured out how to get onto the channel. So I missed a few things. Lada, I wish I could have heard more of yours by the time I got on. It was kind of at the tail end of it. And hello, Larry. Nice to see you. Carmen, pleasure. My work. Still trying to figure that out, I think, you know. For the exhibition, I know we did a series that was called New Myth, and really it was just, it's actually a really old myth, you know. It's just presented in a new format, new materials, new crises to be engaged with, but once again, very old, same story, you know. What I found, and why I was kind of like encouraged to do this was, I remember growing up and hearing like coyote stories, you know, and like these stories, they're, you know, this is our trickster guy, and also a creator entity, but everything he did, him and Iktomi as well, it was like it taught everybody what not to do, you know. It allowed this character was like, he was immortal, but he wasn't deathless. Like he died all the time, you know. He failed over and over as a lesson for everybody. And I think there's incredible value in that. And I was like, oh, I need some new like coyote stories. Like I want to hear about coyote, like you know, signing up for an internet ad or something, you know, that's like a Nigerian prince, or you know, whatever these like current failures are, like voting, like going down and voting in the you know, punching a Chad. I need to hear about coyote punching a Chad, you know, and trying to make sense out of this document. I think New Myth is like kind of an extension of that idea. This is a very old story, but the root of that story held a conversation around these like entities that were corrupted and violent and extractive and toxic, and we had names for them, you know, names for these characters. And I started to realize like we still have names for those characters, but we don't call them monsters anymore, right? We call them business, you know, we call them media, we call them capital, you know. We celebrate them, we worship them. And I'm like, I think that happens because the story doesn't get passed on broad enough and wide enough for people to consider that what they're seeing already had a name, and it was a monster, you know. So New Myth, rather than diving into the activity of combating these monsters, I wanted to show this moment of connection to place and land. I wanted to bring opposites together to create the tools that were needed to fight those monsters. So in the film and the video, these two kind of warrior twins, these monster slayer characters from Mandan myths. We call them Lodge Boy and Spring Boy, and they're bringing water to this desert landscape, and they offer the water to the gypsum sand and pull the tool that they need to combat the enemy of life, the enemy of everything, you know. As that story develops and as it completes outside of the video that I'm presenting with you all there, that act of fighting also turns the heroes monstrous. Like the act of engaging with, even at a antagonistic level, you know, it stains you. And so I wanted to present this without that staining, but like what else is possible, and tried to generate an intimacy and a kindness in the effort of developing a tool, you know. And the tool developed through the bringing of opposites, you know, water to a dry landscape. I'm thinking about this because of what Larry was talking about, and like the flooding, the environmental crises that we're experiencing presently.
Mm-hmm.
This is the byproduct of us not paying attention and not remembering our stories, you know, our old stories. And you know, of course, it's also my fault. Like, I'm sorry to those people who've lost their homes, you know, that their village needs to be moved and changed, because I am addicted to the spoils of the capitalist world that we live in presently, you know. Because I'm hooked. I'm sorry, you know, it's also my fault. I just think about these stories and these relationships and these conversations, and you know, like Larry had said, like it's our obligation to move that forward. I think artists throughout history, artists, our primary function is communication. And what do we communicate? What are we doing? We are maintaining culture. You know, I think culture exists outside of the individual organism, but it is necessary for the survival of the organism. Culture holds the stories, holds the timelines, tells the protocols and the taboos, maintains the history in a song and a dance and a shape, you know, painted on a shirt. Like this is all incredibly important and valuable knowledge, and it is our obligation to maintain that, you know, to see what works, see what's helpful, see what's necessary, and then also, you know, in the realms of humor and absurdity, also the having the freedom to present a coyote story or two, you know, like this is where I failed drastically, should have died from it, you know, somehow survived. Let me tell you this story and let me blame coyote for it, you know, like coyote did this, it wasn't Cannupa, it was coyote. And I think that's the use of mythology, the use of storytelling, the use of presenting a coyote story. I can almost guarantee you, you know, 70% of those stories were, you know, some uncle or some auntie doing something naughty, you know, doing something not right, and trying to save face in the eyes of their child. You know, they're like, oh, coyote did this one time, and it didn't work out for him, so don't do that. Anyway, that's the core of kind of what I'm trying to present in this iteration right now, and I'm happy to be on the phone with you all, or screen.
On the screen, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying at the beginning when only Lada was here and our three guests that, you know, part of the reason I wanted to have this exhibition was so that you know, I thought that in Northern Europe there'd be an interest in Native American art and artists, but also maybe to counter any kind of romantic ideas they might have, or, you know, kind of historicizing vanishing race kind of thoughts. But I also was thinking, and didn't say it then, but I'll say now, that I think that now that our planet is, you know, we're just careening towards this point of no return, I would hope that wider society would see the value of Indigenous lifeways in living on the earth, living with the earth, living with, you know, all of the creatures of the earth and the stones and the sky and the air and the water and all of that. Like, I feel like maybe this is a time when the message can be heard more widely.
Let's hope so. You know,
yeah.
I feel like we've been saying that the whole time. Like every point of engagement, every opportunity where we, you know, where we came across one another, there was that offering, and not just from North America. I'm talking across the globe. I'm talking in Northern Europe. There were moments where people were like, "Yo, there's a better way to do this." It's funny though.
But I guess it's also like other indigenous people, like when we grew up with the capitalism and like I grew up with the Finnish society. I didn't grow up like super traditional way of Sami life. We don't have reindeers. We don't make handicrafts at home. So I think also, like, at least for me, making art about my culture or the stories that we have is like becoming myself, like having a better like kinship with the land where I come from, and being like not better indigenous, but like maybe being more aware of like what is affecting around me, or like to me, and like but also I just like I still keep thinking about Larry and the ravens, because I think the other living beings and dead beings, that's also like one reason for me at least to make art, or like include them into my art. And I think that's why I also kind of named my work in your exhibition Nelimarkka as emergency weather, because I think there's emergency around us in the weather, in the landscapes, while we are like, at least in Arctic, where I come from, because there are a lot of things like that are disappearing because of the climate change, but also like the knowledge that is disappearing with the snow that is disappearing, all the different formats of the snow. I don't even know all the names. Like we have so many different names in Sami language to describe certain snow that are also connected to reindeer herding. So for me, it's also like to gather the knowledge in the format of like photography to kind of like, maybe it's also like, yeah, keep telling the same stories that always been there, like the snow that used to be there, but like now it's disappearing. But yeah. But yeah, I think I need to leave, so I wanted to make like a last comment.
Yeah, thank you, Lada. Thank
I'm
you
sorry,
for
I'm
being so
sorry, but
patient.
I really
Yeah.
enjoyed this short moment with you, and I wish I could stay and hear even more about your working and like thinking in arts. But I really need to make dinner now.
Thank you, Lada.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is like a great segue at this moment, but I was hoping to ask that question about the place of humor. And I think humor is like this kind of I see it working in many ways. I think that people find strength from humor, right? It kind of helps you to not be so um, uh, without hope, perhaps, like there's a strength in humor in that way. But it seems like it's also a way to deliver a message, like with um, we have Jon Quick to See Smith's lithography book, and it's um, maybe not as pointed as some of her other work, but I was thinking of her as someone who definitely uses humor and critique together. And Julie Buffalo Head, whose work we ultimately were not able to include, she as well. And then, of course, Larry's artwork. And I think a lot of people have really responded to I had some high school students come in, and their teacher, and she was saying, it's like they would read the text, and she was saying, like it was funny when she read it. And then when I explained the background and what it meant historically, she was like, oh, wow. It was like so heavy and, like, so there's like so many ways that humor helps to deliver that, like the bad news, the hard lessons that I don't know, like Larry, what would you have to say about humor? I mean, humor is such a big part of your work.
Sorry, my mic was off. I was blowing my nose. Yeah, humor, it came from our ancestors, and I can remember being a little kid, and being around aunties and uncles, family gatherings and cultural gatherings too. And there was always this real dry humor and sometimes really hilarious humor too that, the elders, the adults had, so that's what I grew up around, myself is having, the previous generation, they were really funny, and I always thought that was ironic because it was tough times, and by tough times, I mean, the economy was bad, and because the culture was changing so quickly, a lot of our indigenous people didn't have jobs, because they didn't know how to do, the Western kind of things. And our people are, from our lived off the ocean, they lived off the land. And so we were fishermen, and our expertise for 10,000 years is how to catch fish. We're really good at it, and so I became a fisherman first, when I was a teenager, I was mentored by my father, and his father and his father and his father, they were all fishermen. And in our Niska and Tlingit traditions, we're mentored by for males, we're mentored by our uncles. And for females, they're mentored by their aunties. And the reason for that is because the uncles and aunties can be tough, and they could, be really critical, and tell them when they're doing something wrong and how to fix it. And they can do it with humor too. They say, what, you mess that up. Let's try this again. And you're saying, you look like a, blankety blank blank doing that. We had cuss words in our own language too. And some of them are just really funny. Because I know that with some English cuss words, they're kind of mean. They can be kind of mean. But in our Nishka and Tlingit languages, some of those cuss words are really hilarious. And it's meant to get your attention. And it does. And it's really funny. And anyway, I can remember, going to some of our land claims meetings, when I was a little guy, they were really rugged and tough and grim. They were talking about, these really critical issues about getting our land back. There's nothing more critical than that. And a lot of times, before the meetings, I'd see the aunties and uncles, sitting off by themselves before the meeting started, and they'd be roaring with laughter. They'd be telling jokes and so forth. And you know what that taught us, my generation, was that, when things are really tough and things are really rugged, keeping your humor is the same as keeping your wits about you. You think, what does that mean, keeping your wits? It means that when you're in the midst of battle, you can think clearly. That's it. When you're in the heat of battle, you can think very clearly and not feel oppressed by it. That's what humor does. And not only that, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to feel oppressed by anybody. If you can make jokes and laugh, it's a way of saying, what, I'm not your prisoner. We're always going to be who we are, no matter what you do. We're going to survive this thing and we're going to have fun. And when you guys are off having a grim time, we'll still be having fun, and celebrating and so forth. And the way that I did that with my own art, was I like keeping journals. I write things down. First thing I do when I wake up in the morning is my journal is right next to the bed, and I'll just write whatever pops into my head, whatever it is. And a lot of my art came from those journals. Like if you look at, the one that's titled "In the True Spirit of White Man," is thinking about who indigenous people are, and questioning notions of who white men are. There's no polite way of saying it. There just isn't. So I just call them white men. And there are all kinds of jokes connected to that. It's like, yeah, we can tease white men. It's like we've been living with them for, since the early 1800s. So and we had to do battle with them. And I'm thinking, what connection we have, with Finland? We share a border with Russia. So do you, right?
Oh,
So-
yeah.
so-
Really
so
long
we're-
land border.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're related in that way. So we had to do battle with Russians,
Yeah.
and we were fighting the Russians the same time Napoleon was, back in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
So when that was happening, we had to keep our wits about us, and we had jokes, to carry us through, and we had to have battle tactics, to be fighting them. And like when they arrived in their ships, they had cannons and rifles. So we made armor, so that when we fought hand to hand with them, their musket balls would just bounce off our armor, and so and we'd make jokes about that too.
Mhm.
We'd have, like, and when we would win that battle, you know what we got? We got the double-headed eagle that we could paint on our regalia, and that became kind of a joke, serious one too, though, because it meant that we're engaging them, and if they want to shoot their rifles at us, they have to shoot the double-headed eagle,
Mhm.
because it's painted on our armor, and because we won that battle. We won that battle and we earned the right to wear their crests,
Uh-huh.
and so that became part of the humor too. But anyway, so it shows up in the artwork, and that's why, I wrote that story that's titled "In the True Spirit of White Man,"
Mhm.
because it was discussing who white man was.
Mhm.
In a very specific manner, because when
Mhm.
the indigenous people of the Americas were encountering photography, for the first time, it was with Edward Curtis,
Mhm. Yeah.
back in the early 20th century. And so,
Mhm.
and of course, he was this charlatan, he was, making fake work and so forth. So that's what the journal entry was about. It was about
Mhm.
white man telling fake stories about Indians, And so I had fun with it,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and and what it did was it allowed me to take ownership of that. So
Mhm.
so just like taking the Russians' imperial double-headed eagle, I
Mhm.
took Edward
Yeah.
Curtis's flagship image that's titled The Vanishing Race
Mhm.
and made a lithograph of it.
Mhm.
So the lithograph
Yeah.
is now in the Arts and Embassies program,
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
so it's now owned by the federal government.
Mhm. Yeah.
and and this is what I find to be totally hilarious,
Mhm.
is that
Yeah.
now this artwork is
Mhm.
shared in American embassies around the world,
Mhm.
and it's telling the story of, white man.
Mhm.
So
Right.
it's both funny
Yeah.
and it's
Mhm.
subversive. And the really
Yes.
funny part, I still find this to be very
Mhm.
totally cool, is that
Mhm.
it shows up in American embassies,
Mhm. Mhm. Right,
and
right. That they're
yeah,
they're showing this to the world. They're presenting the story.
that's right. They're
Yeah.
telling the indigenous people's story
Mhm. Yeah.
without really
Mhm.
being totally aware of it. And I
Mhm.
had to be kind of subversive about it. For example, I wanted to name as many tribes as possible, as many native nations as I
Mhm.
could.
Mhm.
So I found a couple hundred of them, and I
Mhm.
wanted to make their names invisible. So I was making this lithograph, and I was
Mhm.
asking, I was collaborating with a master lithographer
Mhm.
at the Tamarind Art
Mhm.
Institute, and I
Mhm.
told him what I wanted to do. I said, I want to
Mhm.
make an invisible layer, on this lithograph. I
Mhm.
said, do you got invisible ink?
Mhm.
and and he said, no, but you know what? We could do a sheen. We could do shellac.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
did a layer, and
Mhm.
it is invisible. So when you
Mhm.
look at it straight on,
Uh-huh.
you can't see the names. They're invisible.
Uh-huh.
But when you get a 45-degree angle
Okay.
to it,
Uh-huh.
all the names become
Yeah.
visible. And
Mhm.
that's a trickster thing.
Mhm.
That's something like
Yeah.
what Raven would do. And of course, it's got humor, and yet it's a really critical part of the story too, though. You know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, so Cannupa, you were talking about um, using humor. And
Mhm.
snaky humor. That's what tricksters do. They do
Mhm.
sneaky stuff. So that's an
Mhm.
example of using humor
Mhm.
and doing it in a sneaky way too. So because not
Mhm.
everybody notices it.
Mhm.
Linda.
We have Linda? Oh
You,
my.
I think you're muted, Linda.
Okay. Hi,
Can you
Linda.
hear me? Hi,
So
Cannupa.
glad you finally got here. This was so difficult. Sorry.
That link
So
worked.
is this Cannupa and Larry?
Yeah. So so we're still here.
Okay.
And we have a couple of people who've been watching as an audience, and if they want to ask any questions, I'm just going to invite them to go ahead. Otherwise, we'll just keep talking for a little bit longer. We were just talking about kind of the role humor plays as a way of what are the words? Subversion and resilience, I guess, are the important parts there. And I was thinking about art as a form of activism, because I think that's like another theme that's kind of running through. And so welcome, Linda. Would you like to kind of introduce yourself and your say a little bit about yourself and your art making?
Yeah. I want to know what happened to everybody else. It's just Larry and
Yeah.
Cannupa?
Yeah, so what happened is Meryl and Jenni had health issues. They couldn't join us, and then Lada had
okay.
to leave. She was on from the very beginning. We were
Oh,
waiting. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm Linda Lomahaftewa. I'm Hopi and Choctaw, and I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Originally from Arizona, but I've been living here, I guess like 50 years now.
Mhm.
And I'm retired from teaching from the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I'm still practicing my art very slowly now. Um, and different things get in the way. And I was telling Cannupa, I said I had to uh, rearrange my flight schedule because I leave this afternoon after the Zoom meeting to go to Kansas City to be on a panel. So so I've been trying all morning to connect.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Cannupa might be at the airport even. So
I
oh,
made it.
I was
made it
just
to the
told that you're not on the
hotel.
live screen, Linda. So now you are. Now everybody can
Wait,
see you. Okay.
oh, okay. I wasn't
Sorry,
before.
we're having all the technical
Yeah,
difficulties.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Larry.
Hi, nice to see you, Linda.
I sent you a text message too. I was trying to see who I could connect with to get on, but anyway, finally.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's too bad you weren't here when Lada was still here, because she was interested in this topic of, what it was like to be an art student in just a regular art school, where it's not, and so I was thinking like the II experience is so different for students than
Oh
being
yeah,
in a
yeah,
mainstream art school.
yeah,
And I know you went to both, and then you've taught
yeah,
at both as well.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So being at IAIA as a high school student,
mhm,
meeting uh, tribal people from all across the United States was my
mhm,
first experience of learning. Who everyone, all the different cultures across
mhm,
the United States, and then we've remained friends after all these years. It's like a family that keeps growing. And then when I went to the San Francisco Art Institute, there was a group of us that went together. So we were a support group to each other. So that really helped. And then you learn to be more independent. So
mhm.
um, and then coming back to teach, and Cannupa becomes one of my students and a friend after. Um, and Larry, a colleague, he taught photography at IAIA, and we've remained friends after all these years too. Did I answer your question right?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. Yeah, that was really nice. And Lada was also saying she had the experience of she grew up in a Sami household where they didn't have reindeer and they didn't do handicrafts. So she feels like photography has been a way to reconnect with or to connect for first time even with the land and with her ancestors. And I was saying that's like you've got the artwork in this exhibition, the Choctaw Bond family, that you also had that experience of getting to know that side of your family more through the photographs, that you were more familiar with the Hopi side, and the Choctaw, there was more of that, using the photos as like a mediating medium of getting to know these people that you maybe didn't meet. And
so with the Choctaw side of the family, learning about the Mississippian people and the culture, and the mound culture. So America Meredith and I traveled across from Spiral Mound to all the way to Katua Mounds in North Carolina, and we visited all these different mound sites, so that I would get to be more familiar with that landscape, and that has really opened new doors for me, and new way of seeing things in the landscape, and how I can incorporate all that together with my Hopi background as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So, and I do go back to Oklahoma a lot, but it's not always, because I really feel connected to the people in Oklahoma, and the artists, and they're still, when I go to visit, they say things to me like, "Oh, you came back home," and it always makes me feel good when they say that.
Yeah, really nice. I'm looking at what our original list of questions, since we kind of I think there's been
sorry I missed what everyone else had to say. I wish I could have.
So one thing that I think kind of comes out when maybe we could talk a little bit more about, like, there's kind of commonalities and common themes and common concerns that many different groups of Indigenous people have. And I think, for example, concern for the environment is one that is, I was saying it's very timely, because I think mainstream people are now thinking about the environment and are concerned. So the Indigenous ways of looking at the ancestors and the relationship of to land and to just to everything, to the animals and the insects and the sky and the water. I have this Yon Quick to See Smith lithograph in the lithograph book in the exhibition, and it's called All My Relations, and she's showing all the insects and the listing her relations as like coyote, water, air, like all of that. So I think that's I was hoping this would be kind of these through lines in the exhibition in that way. And one of the reasons I wanted to also, besides Cannupa's new myth is on 3 walls, but we also have Belonging on the monitor downstairs, so people can listen to that, because I thought it was really important to tell the story of the bison, and to have people understand that connection, and that there was the genocide of the bison that went along with the genocide of people. And there's I should have looked up. I'm always blanking on people's names, but there's a Sami artist in Norway who's done an artwork called Pile of Sápmi, and it's reindeer skulls, and it always makes me think of those historical photographs of the piles of the bison and buffalo skulls. So I think that they're especially having these 2 exhibitions together, Sami artists and then Native American and First Nation art, that it's an opportunity to talk about indigeneity and what are some of those common concerns, and what can, I'm hoping that people who visit these exhibitions kind of reflect on the two exhibitions in conversation with each other. And I had told Jenni and Lada about Cannupa's artwork, because I thought, since their theme was about a utopian future, I thought they would be very interested in the ancestral future technologies. So I think that's, I don't know, maybe we've kind of covered that topic a little bit, but I don't. And maybe I'd also had development as artists, like what were your influences, which artists, that sort of thing. And then maybe this topic of Indigenous art within the wider context of contemporary art, because, I am looking at it as contemporary art and as, contemporary art exhibition, but I wonder, like, is there kind of a marginalization when you organize exhibitions that are like, it's all women artists, or it's all Indigenous artists, or it's all African American artists, and how do you get away from that if it's a group exhibition? I don't know. Larry's got
the answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Larry's got a photograph in the exhibition, the sacred power pole, where it's like saying that he's been invited to these exhibitions that are like, spirit of Native America, and titles like this, and that, so he's found a sacred power pole for the curator. He's so happy. Yeah. So
it's funny because the contemporary art canon that exists presently as a global economic driver has extracted from and drawn from Indigenous peoples and mark making, symbols, all of this sort of stuff for generations, so it's funny that there is this notion of invitation. It's like, you've been showing our work the whole time. It's just not by us, you've been showing our work without context, so I think what it's always presented as like that this will somehow benefit us, and I'm like, no, this will benefit contemporary art. This is actually, once you invite us with our voices to fill in the foam of the this thing without substance, contemporary art. It's just like, it has no substance. It's got all the shapes, got all the forms, but no context. So now it feels slow to realize that, and there is a power dynamic that's at play. That's like, you're invited into our world, and I'm like, no. You've been visiting our world the whole time. You've made up a tiny little version of the world within our world the whole time. So it's interesting to me, and also I'm definitely in that position of from generations before, maintaining visual languages, carrying on stories, telling jokes when it hurt, like all this continuum of craft and kinship and intergenerational knowledge exchange. Like, I'm at a point where I benefit from all of those previous efforts as being invited into the contemporary art world present, but I think there's a power dynamic at play that needs to be challenged and needs to be expressed, and that is what I was just stating, is that we have realness in the creation of our work. It has substance. It has meaning.
Yeah.
The other thing is it's almost silly, it could be powerful, it could be strong, and this is why you see this contemporary art canon throughout, the last 40 years inviting people who have been marginalized, whose cultural work has actually developed and had been extracted from for the contemporary art field, you know. It's providing context, it's providing substance, so that the work is not empty and void, so that it doesn't feel like foam when you touch it, you know. And what's really, oh, sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and through each generation, like, you know, like with Cannupa's, the younger generation, they have a new way of saying things and expressing and using new words that, you know, I never thought of using, or how to explain things. So I really appreciate that, and so they're connecting to the younger generation that's coming up too, and it's just exciting to me to see, you know, what happens next and how people express themselves through each generation. And, you know, acknowledging, you know, from the past, from our ancestors,
Yeah.
what has
Yeah.
been taught. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I was just thinking that there have been these attempts to decolonize the museum, like the Nordic countries giving over to the Sami pavilions, you know, and even like McNeil will have like an indigenous curator curating, like there are certain strategies like that to try to do better, you know, but it's yeah, I mean, it's difficult because the museum field has this history of being a colonial entity, and that's.
You know what? That's a good point that you bring up. You know, the question of decolonizing our art institutions. You know, that's people have been talking about that for 50 years. You know, it's nothing new. You know, and I remember talking to a young PhD student. I think it was in the early 1990s. She was writing her thesis about it. And anyway, she sent me the thesis, you know, just the outline of it. And I read it, you know, and I was giving her feedback about it. And I was saying, yeah, I think that, you know, I commended her on thinking about it in those terms, you know, about decolonizing, you know, museums and so forth. And part of the feedback I gave was that museums can't be decolonized until the director is indigenous. You know, so I think it's really nice. It's really great actually that, you know, Native curators are making inroads, you know, to various museums and so forth. But that's only a toe in the door. You know, it's not real. I mean, it is real, but it isn't real. You know, because that, you know, that one brown person who's trying to, you know, speak for this whole culture, you know, if that person is just, you know, one person, one voice in an army in the museum, they're going to be tokenized. You know, there's no nice way of saying it. They become tokens in a way because, you know, the voice that they're using is minimized. And that's just the way it is, you know, and you look at, you know, a lot of the mainstream museums, you know, and the way to evaluate it is look at their collections, you know, see what they have in their collections. And you ask the rhetorical question, how much indigenous art do they have? And for a lot of them, it's, you know, it's token. It's very tokenistic, you know. So yeah, they're collecting, you know, the art of some of the, you know, what I would call art stars, you know, and say, yeah, they're. But what about, you know, the young indigenous people just starting their careers? Why isn't their art, in the collections? And that's the way it should be, because that's the way it is for the white artists. A lot of the young white artists get their work, they into the big museums and so forth, but not the brown people. That's not happening. So you know what it means? It means that these mainstream institutions are still, tokenistic. They're not real. They don't represent the people yet. They just don't. And the only way that's going to change, in my opinion, is from the top down. It can't be like their political Reaganomics, where the philosophy is, trickle down, well, it's not going to trickle down, trickle down economics just doesn't work. It has to start from the top. So anyway, it means a lot of these mainstream institutions, they need to have Indigenous people as the directors, and that's how change happens. It's from the top down, and so until then, and just staying on the sidelines, seeing all this, I don't know, the world, the mainstream institutions, they're still dominated by white people,
Yeah.
and and it becomes dull, it becomes boring, and we see the same boring stuff year after year after year. It's like, and I'm thinking to myself, come on, you guys, you're supposed to be, you're supposed to be about interpreting art of the world, not just your buddies, not just your narrow band of friends, so anyway, I'm still waiting for that day when mainstream institutions, mainstream museums start collecting the work of Indigenous artists. Come on, get moving on that. It needs to start happening. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and of course, some museums are, but I think your point is that the wider, that it's still like individual institutions. So, and of course, we still have, we're still having, like the British Museum being like the big example of.
I mean,
what
I
a
would
colonial-
I would go even one further. Like you don't decolonize a museum, like that's what it is. It is
Yeah.
it is the byproduct
Right.
of
If you think of what
colonialism.
it,
It is the repository for extraction, cultural extraction. There's this idea that it's supposed to educate, but it hasn't done that for generations now. It's a bank. It's a safety deposit box. This is what it ends up being, and this is why it's boring. It can't produce on the pulse. It can only show you what happened a year ago, 2 years ago, which at this point in history is so far behind the moment. Like I think museums are going to have a huge challenge in the future as we reevaluate value. And I think at the environmental level, these systems have generated this idea of value. We know what it's worth, but we don't know what it costs. We don't know what it costs. Like at large, some of us do. Some of us know deeply what it costs to make something. The value is not a part of that. And the museum, that's what it does. It's a place that holds the value of the work, but does not express the cost. And until we figure out how to present work and how to educate an audience to have that question, the only thing a museum can do is preserve. it's a preservation model.
Right. Well,
we're cultures of maintenance, not preservation. Maintenance.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, what defines museum is that you have this collection and you're trying to preserve it in perpetuity for the public. And like I'm thinking about the art market. Like for me as a museum person, I feel like the art market is also its own kind of thing where it's like certain people's artwork has all this money value and it doesn't always reflect its substance, from my maybe snooty opinion as an art historian, but still, like even so I think museums give a value in a certain way, but then there's also this art market that's just rich people buying things. And maybe it's getting a little off topic, but I think in museums, like those of us who are in this profession, like we do actually want to educate. I hope that we do in some way, but I totally understand that the museum is a colonial entity, that's completely its history, and that it's that historically especially it was very linked to theft. So hopefully most of us are doing better now. I don't know, but I mean, and like you're saying, like the museum is still, it represents the past, even if it's contemporary art museum. And then I guess what could be most cutting edge then are these more art showing spaces that aren't selling, that aren't linked to money. We've got 5 minutes left in this meeting, I just realized. But then it's like, because they're not linked to money, then maybe it's harder to keep them going. It's harder, it's like people are having to volunteer their time, and we're running out of time, so I don't want to take up our time. But anyway, I see that it's,
yeah.
Well,
I would
and
say
also,
that the cut.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
no, I was just going to mention really quickly, that generally, a lot of, Indigenous artists I know, we're not really concerned about, collections and things like that, because, we're immersed in our art. We're doing that. And the only reason, I even had to think about, the topic of decolonizing the museum was because scholars keep asking me about it. It's like, so I had to come up with an answer, and so in the meantime, I'm a scholar, but an artist first, so I think a lot of us Indigenous artists, we're gonna let all this other stuff just keep happening, because that's beyond anything we can really affect. But so in the meantime, I think we're just going to keep on making art, and let other people worry about decolonizing museums and all that stuff. I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I want to thank you all for hanging in there and for being here and for having your art in the exhibition. It looks really great. We'll have some photos of the installation that we can send you soon. I did send that little video I took. So, I think it all looks really wonderful and good, and I'm very happy that it's here, and we've heard good feedback from people, and it's really making people think. Like, we're hearing that people have been thinking about it and getting more from it as time goes on. Like, they're thinking, it's making them think. So I think that's really important, and I'm glad that they are really appreciating it and taking it seriously, and I think it's good for them to to not just see the same thing in our museum all the time. So it's, as I was glad as a foreigner working in Finland, I thought it was important that I bring, art from where I'm from to this museum. So yeah, great. Yeah. So So I want to thank you all, and I want to thank I think we have like 2 people watching us live who've stuck in there all that time. So thank you very much. And yeah, it's 8 p.m. here, so so have a nice rest of your day. And
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Nice to see you guys.
Yep, absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See you, Linda.
Bye, Larry.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Linda. Bye.